Why is this Canadian burning himself to death out here in the 100-degree California desert? Well, because I want to bring you this truck as well as its littlest brother, two different ZR2 Bisons. This is the 2024 2500, and we have the Colorado ZR2 Bison as well. We're gonna off-road these bad boys today, so come along with me. Let's go. All right, so it's been a while since I've been able to sit at this desk and bring you a video, but you know what I wanted to do is I really wanted to take the time while I was out in the desert, while I was off-roading these trucks, to really pay attention to what it was I was doing rather than, you know, trying to talk during it. So I'm going to kind of show you a lot of the footage that I've done while there, but I want to talk over it because now I've had time to collect my thoughts and kind of put things together. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Well, first and foremost, what I want to do is kind of give you like a layout of the land, how this came to be, where I went, how I got there, all kind of stuff. So many of you may know or may not know, but of course, I am from Canada, you know, in a province called Ontario. I'm basically very far north of where we ended up doing these off-road drives, which were just outside of Palm Springs, California. So obviously it took me about 3 flights to get there, but I was excited to do so because, man, I just could not wait to get behind the wheel of these two amazing off-road trucks. So that being said, you know, I finally got in there. I got in a little bit late, so I didn't get to do as much, you know, any filming on the first day as I would like. But the big day was, of course, the second day. Now, again, we flew into Palm Springs. That's where the hotel was that, you know, I stayed at. Beautiful hotel. It was wonderful. And then basically what it was, you know, getting up the next day, and we were going to drive about an hour, a little bit over an hour on the highway, so on road, which was kind of cool, to we call it Johnson Valley Off-Road, or Johnson Valley. It was a desert basically, but it's called Johnson Valley. So many of you who are from down that area or have been down that area might know what I'm talking about. But this was not a closed course circuit, which was really cool because we really were getting to test these trucks in the wild, so to speak, right? But backing up a second, first and foremost, I did get an opportunity after I flew in to at least take out the regular Chevrolet Silverado, if you want to call it regular, 2500 ZR2, not the Bison, but the regular ZR2. It was hooked up to a trailer. It was about, I think they said 31 feet in around that area, about 8,000 pounds. So, you know, of course, more than capable, I'm sure this truck will be to handle it. But again, we're talking about a specifically designed off-road HD. So I was very curious to see how it handled the trailer. Now, I have a trailer about that size myself, which actually we towed with the Tahoe. But I do notice it's, you know, on the edge of what a Tahoe can pull. So I really was, you know, interested to see a similar trailer pulled with this HD. And can I just tell you, I need to buy an HD now. I mean, holy smokes, this thing was night and day difference. The one thing I was really curious to see though is because, again, this is an off-road driven vehicle. We're going to talk with the, you know, the details of what these HDs have and all that kind of stuff. But basically, again, it's an off-road driven vehicle. So you think, okay, you know, maybe a stiffer suspension is going to give me a little rougher ride than an HD already might. But again, the ride was phenomenal. It was a quiet cabin. And the crazy part is where we had basically a planned route where I was supposed to take this truck, which was kind of cool because they took it through a very windy area. And that's one thing I noticed when pulling a travel trailer, not a fifth wheel, of course, is the wind, right? You know, and when you have a vehicle, weight-wise, and then just, you know, suspension-wise, of course, you know, what a Tahoe would have versus, of course, you know, what an HD would have, you know, it just kept it so steady. I didn't even recognize that the trailer was even there on it. And there was literally a sign that said high wind area. There was windmills by the hundreds basically off to the side of where I was going. And so clearly that's a windy area. And, you know, sure enough, no problem at all, you know, got up to speed, no issues. Again, these are things I was hoping and expecting, but it was really nice to see that. But anyways, trailering aside, oh, and actually, so one other thing about the trailering too was I loved the trailer vision camera. So even though I had those massive mirrors off the side, the one thing I'd love to have in my own personal vehicle is when you hit the signal, for example, it'll show you on the screen the side that you're turning. So when you're turning a corner, you're not going to cut too tight into that vehicle or cut the curb. I actually ended up using that camera more than I used the mirrors for those turning, you know, turning right or left, because I just found that those cameras worked so great. There's many other things that cameras do as well, but that's one of the things that really stood out to me. Getting back to finally getting off-road. So woke up very early on the second morning that I was there and basically had, you know, a little bit of breakfast and had to talk about, okay, here's where we're going to go. Here's what we're going to do. And we did so, obviously, right? So we headed out on the trip. The cool part about this was, you know, and these events I love is I actually got to meet Zach Clapman. And if you don't know who he is, and unfortunately, I don't watch much YouTube, although I'm on it, I don't watch much of it. And I think more so because, again, I'm in the truck area, but my co-pilot, or I was his co-pilot, depending on who was driving at the time, was Zach Clapman from the Smoking Tire, which is, I mean, they don't need my recommendation because they're a much larger channel than mine, over 1 million subscribers. But if you're into cars especially, that is a channel to check out. Super great guy, super intelligent. Great conversation, but it was cool because, you know, he has a car side of things and he's looking at things from that end, and I'm obviously a truck guy, so we had some good conversation about how these trucks were. But regardless, that was my co-pilot. We drove out to the middle of the desert, as I said, and we ended up at this place. There was like a little oasis. It was crazy. It was this place called Laser Town, and I feel like it's there for off-road racers to kind of like stop at or hang out at. I'm not exactly sure what the intent and purpose of it is, but I think I have a little bit of footage of it here. But it was just an interesting place. And then of course GM had a tent set up there, which, you know, we could kind of get out of the heat, because again, if you look at me, I'm a very pale person, and you know, I left probably 40-degree weather to go down, and it was 104 degrees in the desert. Not when I first got there in the morning, but by afternoon it was 104 degrees, and I've learned very quickly there's no place to hide in the desert other than inside the vehicle, and sometimes we had to be out of it, of course, obviously. So that being said, the first drive, we basically split up two groups. There was, you know, a number of us there. We had ZR2 HDs and we had the Colorado ZR2 Bisons, of course, Bison on both ends, sorry. And so I was fortunate enough, what we drove out was the ZR2 Bison HD, and that's what we took out off-roading first. And oh, before I actually talk about the off-road, I do want to obviously mention, you know, in that hour ride, it really gave, you know, myself and Zach a really good chance to see how this truck drives without any load on it, you know, in the back, or, you know, towing anything on the highway. Again, given that this is a very specifically designed off-road vehicle. And can I just say, again, like when I had it out for trailering the regular ZR2, the Bison was no different in the sense it was a quiet cab, you know, relatively smooth, all things considered. You know, as a vehicle that I could actually find myself driving on a daily basis as a daily driver, rather than just having it for a towing perspective or just an off-road perspective, as this truck's designed for. So that was really cool. And, you know, I'm glad that we got that hour there. And I'll talk about the Colorado because we drove the Colorado back, the hour back. But again, it gave us both a really good impression as to how this vehicle works, you know, when on road. But getting back to the off-road component, so first and foremost, we were again not on a closed course. This was a very you know, rugged terrain area, and we took it that way. There was I think it's the King of the Hill or whatever. We were like right alongside where that race was, you know, kind of being done, or that ride or whatever was being done. So we had some very steep inclines and declines to take care of, which normally, if I just looked at it myself, I mean, I'm kind of an off-roader. I, you know, used to race ATV motocross, but not really taking trucks off-road. So this was quite the experience. And again, taking a truck that weighs, you know, almost 9,000 pounds was a little intimidating when you're looking at this, you know, incline and of course decline. Now, of course, you know, we had the Duramax in this truck. The ZR2s, if you didn't already know, so from Chevrolet, do come with either the gas 6.6 liter, or you can get the 6.6 liter diesel. Both have the made it to the Allison 10-speed transmission, 470 horsepower in the diesel, 975 pound-feet of torque. And by the way, max towing is 18,500 pounds. So again, that's why I had no problem handling that trailer. But again, so we had some great torque, so I wasn't, you know, super nervous. But again, these were just areas that I'm not familiar with and not normally go down. But Chevy just threw us out there and said, listen, we're going to go, and this is what we're going to do. And so go and do we did. And again, it was really cool to see some of the features on this vehicle. Again, if you didn't already know, so this truck, this HD, has 18-inch gloss black AEV wheels. And by the way, if you don't know who AEV is, who creates this Bison truck alongside of Chevy, they're American Expedition Vehicles. They're an amazing off-road company who designs amazing components. And of course, they've collaborated for the ZR2 Bison HD half-ton as well as the Colorado. And the components that they've got on this thing are what make it even that much more off-road than the regular ZR2 models. And again, so 18-inch gloss black wheels. The tires on this are a 35-inch Goodyear Wrangler Duratrack, which again, I found worked really well off-road as well as on-road on the way there. Underneath they have, you know, steel stamped skid plates, pretty much all the way across, thank God, because again, some of the things we went over. They have high cut up approach and departure angled bumpers, steel stamp bumpers. Again, these are only on the Bison, these steel stamp bumpers front and rear. And actually there's a little bit of a, I believe the Colorado for sure, there's like a, you know, a skin that goes around that. So when you do damage any of that plastic, you can just take that off and put it back on for, you know, aesthetic reasons. But again, front and rear steel stamp bumpers with provisions for a winch in in the front, and then they have built into the bumpers, these steel stamp bumpers, of course, is you have the recovery areas, recovery hooks or recovery circles, whatever you want to call those. Those are built into those steel stamp bumpers. So that's, you know, a really cool feature. The other thing that the Bison has, of course, too, and the ZR2, but that it has is the locking rear differential. Now, many of you have asked, why didn't they do the front differential lock like we're going to see with the Colorado? Well, there is reasoning behind that. You know, again, the whole idea with this truck is they didn't want to compromise anything, so they wanted to make sure that we had the ability to trailer, but we also had the ability to off-road. And what they found was with the different modes this truck has, by the way, there's many different modes. You have off-road, train, all that kind of stuff. You know, in conjunction with like the hill descent control, all that kind of stuff, they really found that, you know, in the torque, the low end torque of this truck, that there really wasn't a necessity. So if they could avoid that extra cost, that extra weight that allows them to have, you know, more towing weight and so on, that is the reason why they just went with the rear locking differential. And again, I went in some pretty rugged terrain on this drive, and I didn't really find a reason or a need to have that front locking differential. I think you would have to be in some extreme circumstances for that to even maybe come into play. So again, just want to kind of answer that question because I know that's going to be put out there. Now, the ZR2 HD also has front, upper, and lower control arms and steering knuckles that are different. They're unique to the off-road truck. That's one thing. A couple other things I want to basically speak about was, and thank goodness it had, because we were going down some very steep declines as well. Huge Duralife rotors. So again, if you're towing that trailer, you need to stop in a hurry, or if you're off-roading, you have that as well. The other thing was, it is only available, by the way, in the 2500. There is no 3500 available, and only in the crew cab. So they have kind of, you know, eliminated some of the choices you have, which, again, I come from the sales side. I think that really that's probably how that truck's going to be spec'd out 90% of the time anyways. Yes, there's going to be 10% of you that might want a 3500, that, you know, that might want, you know, something different, extended cab for whatever reason, double cab for whatever reason. But I just truly believe that this is the way this truck is going to sell, and it makes sense. So if they can make more of them, you know, so be it. Again, 18-inch wheels, 35-inch tires on this. You know, that's kind of covering most of what this truck is, aside from obviously the luxury items on the inside. So that's the other thing. Not only is off-road, not only can it trailer, but it has all the luxury options on the inside. You know, heated seats, ventilated seats, beautiful 13.4-inch color touchscreen, 11-inch screen in front of the driver, tons of camera views, by the way, as well. So the forward camera view is great, because when you come up an incline and you can't even see. First of all, the truck's so big, and there's a big hood, and you're going up like this, you can't see, you know, what's coming down. But if you have that forward vision camera, you do. The one thing they didn't have was the underbody cameras. We are going to talk about that, because they did have those in the Colorado, but they didn't have that in the HD. You know what, they gave a reason. I can't remember exactly what it was, but again, I feel that, again, from everything we did, which was you know, pretty difficult stuff, some of it, I found that it wasn't really overly necessary to have that. But again, maybe they'll have that in the future. They might have locking front differential in the future too, but for now, phenomenal the way it was. By the way, the truck we were in retails for just under $96,000 US. But again, I just found that the suspension, so that it has that Multimatic DSSV suspension, and what was cool about it, again, if we can talk about the on-road and off-road, was that it didn't rattle our teeth out, or my teeth out, when we're on the on-road. And then the same token, it was stiff enough, more than stiff enough, for when we're going over some of the really rugged terrain that you can see that I've been showing here on the video, that it really soaked up that stuff very well as well. We got it going a little bit higher speeds, but a lot of what we were doing was, you know, a lot of like, you know, crawling and all that kind of stuff, just to show its, you know, capabilities. And again, we didn't have any issues with, you know, kind of ground clearance or anything like that. Of course, this is a massive truck, right? So again, if I can speak to anything about it, I just love the versatility of it, and of course the looks of this truck. I mean, come on, I don't know. I mean, looks are always subjective, but I love the looks of this. One interesting thing that one of my friends had pointed out, Canadian friends, Steve from Truck King, is he pointed out, hey, you know, unlike the ZR2 half-ton and the ZR2 Colorado, there doesn't seem to be an actual true flow tie, which is, you know, all the way through on this truck. So I asked one of the engineers why that was. Why is there no actual flow tie? Why is there a bit of plastic in behind there? Well, it's because it's an HD truck with a big motor. They already have a massively open grille that they couldn't have that open as well, because there's some brackets and stuff that they had to put back there for different things that they had to hide behind there. So really it ended up being just an aesthetic thing. And again, because there's more than enough airflow in the front of that massive grille of the ZR2, right? But next, we got the opportunity to come back to base camp, you know, that oasis, that laser town, and we got to switch out to the Colorado the Colorado ZR2 Bison. Now, much like the 2024 ZR2 HD, the Colorado obviously has collaboration. ZR2 Bison, pardon me, Colorado has much collaboration with the with AEV, of course, which they did in the past. It's actually the first vehicle, first truck that AEV collaborated with GM. Obviously a few years back on the original Colorado, generation before Colorado at least. And so it was really cool to see what this vehicle had. Now, it has a couple things on this truck, of course, that were, available on the HD. So we're talking about, a lot more skid plates underneath. We're talking about AEV gloss black wheels. They're 18 inches on this, but there are 35-inch tires. So that's, and I don't think there's any other truck in the class right now that has a 35-inch off-road tire from stock. Of course, it also has the Multimatic DSSV suspension. But one thing it does have, pardon me, that is like a segment exclusive, is it has the jounce control dampers with those Multimatic suspensions. So again, that's, that bottoming, that stopping from bottoming out that has. So that's a pretty cool thing. It also, of course, has the locking front and rear differentials. It has more skid plates, as I mentioned, the unique wheels, of course. It has the AEV badging on the outside and, of course, on the seats. And again, like its biggest brother, it does have the steel stamped front and rear bumpers, again, with the recovery hooks on those. So again, from a looks perspective, but they're high up cut. And I will tell you that it made a big difference. We were scraping across some rocks out there. Actually, just check this out for a second. So you can see it actually works. It does what it's supposed to. And again, it kind of saved the truck. If that was a plastic bumper, that thing would have been ripped right off there. So again, what else does it have here? And basically it has some of the best in class in terms of, ground clearance, breakover, approach angle. In fact, I gave you some of those numbers. It has the best in class ground clearance at 12.2 inches. We definitely put that through the test when we went through a lot of these rocky areas. The best breakover at 26.9 degrees, the best approach and departure angle, as I mentioned, approach angle at 38.2 degrees and departure at 26 degrees. Now, again, we actually got going a little bit quicker at sometimes with the Colorado. We went through like a sand area. It was kind of cool. It's kind of like, wiggling a little bit, but surprisingly keeping fairly steady for the speed we're going and it being very, very loose sand. And then again, we got into even more rocky situations than we did with the HD, which was, going up and downhill and, some very, very tight areas. And that was a cool part, I think, that I liked about the Colorado if we're going to compare it to the ZR2. Somebody actually there, another Canadian actually out of Quebec had asked me a question when we were standing there going, if you could buy either of these trucks, which would you get? And I had to think about it because for my own applications, the HD would be, kind of the hands down, only because, I have a trailer, I have a family, it's a bigger truck, it does more basically for what I personally need. Now, if I was single or if it was just my wife and I, for an example, hands down, I would get the Colorado. And why would I? Because I love it. It's such a fun truck. It's, it's very nimble. It's versatile. The 2.7 liter, I don't care what anybody else out there says, until you get a chance to take it off road, I think you got to kind of hold your tongue on this because I was very impressed with how the 2.7 liter engine in this worked. By the way, it's a four-cylinder turbo, of course. 2.7 liter, producing 310 horsepower, but it's the torque that's impressive. It's 430 pound-feet of torque, and that is what you need when you're off-roading, right? So again, that was one of the cool things. Now, the other thing that this has as the Bison Edition, by the way, is it has the tire mounted in the back of the truck. A, I think it looks cool, but B, it's actually practical for the simple fact that those 35-inch tires, it would not fit underneath. We would have been hung up on everything and anything all the way along. I think if you're in town, you could probably just take that off, but when you're off-roading, obviously you need that spare tire. Yes, I know it's only crew cab only and it's only a 5-foot box. That does eliminate some of the box. That's kind of one of the things that it kind of stinks about. But that being said, there really is no other choice. It has to be in the back of the truck simply because of the fact that it would get hung up underneath. Actually, one of the things that was noted though by Zach, which I didn't even really pay attention to first and foremost, was the fact that it does eliminate some of your back vision, of course, so your rear view mirror. And one of the differences, of course, I forgot to mention it with the HD versus the Colorado. The HD has the rear vision camera mirror, whereas the Colorado does not have that option. I think that would be a cool option to have in the Colorado if they can somehow figure out a way to have the camera and it's not in way of the tires, so you have a little bit of that better visibility. But speaking of visibility, that truck has tons of camera views as well, surround vision camera, forward vision camera, and like I said earlier in this video, it did have the underbody camera that we don't have in the HD truck. So that was another cool feature about this as well. But again, we went over some really high, really tall rocks, and the 12.2-inch ground clearance handled it well. Narrow areas handled that well. The speed was great. Again, my only faux pas would be it doesn't tow as much, obviously, as an HD. It doesn't have as much room as an HD, or, you know, of course, the half ton for that matter. So it really is, you know, not really designed. I wouldn't say that's a family vehicle because there's not much back seat room. But if it's just you and your partner or somebody else, dog, whatever, you know, obviously that truck, I think, is more than capable and more than sufficient for what most people would need. So overall, I have to thank Chevrolet so much for having me out. It was such a good time, but it was really not even just a good time, but it was really a time that opened my eyes because I read about and I see about these trucks all the time and I share these trucks with you all the time. So to have the first-hand drive, the first-hand ability to see how these things handle, how these things work, how loud the cabin is, how they ride on road, how they drive off-road was a really great experience that I can, you know, come and tell you because again, on what I like about my channel, I think you know this, is I'm really authentic to what I say and what I believe in, what I like and what I don't like. And you know, I was really impressed with both of these trucks. It would be a hard decision again if I was a single person trying to decide which truck I want to buy. But anyways, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, anything you think I missed, please comment below. I would love to talk to you about it. Until next time, take care.